live from Brussels. It's
Zen
Live. That's right. We're very excited because we have a fresh new look and a new name for the show. It's now ZN Live. It makes a lot of sense. That means if we do it on a Thursday, it's still okay. And you can follow us on the hashtag ZN Live. And we're very excited today. We have a special guest, Caroline, who is an experienced communicator. She's been working across a range of different organizations, from the Commission to the Parliament to Public Affairs to Eurocities and now to Euro, pronounced the French way. She is going to tell us a little bit about some podcast, books, and tips, ideas. So you were telling us about a book that you read during the pandemic. What was it, and why should we all read it?
Well, first of all, Philip, thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. It's great to be here, and I'm delighted to be the first guest on the rebrand, and I wish you every success with it. Yes, we were just chatting there about a little bit of pandemic reading, and I'm a member of the Irish Embassy Book Club here in Brussels. And one of the books that we read quite recently, was 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. And it's set in the first 56 days of the lockdown set in Ireland. And not only is it a crime fiction book, but reading back over how we were all just kind of settling into pandemic and dealing with it and finding our feet in it. It's also like it is a little bit frightening as well about how far we'd come, and especially back in those uncertain days at the very beginning.
So what's your kind of habit been? I mean, obviously, we've all had very strange habits over the last 2 years, reading certain books, listening to certain podcasts. So were you kind of diving into reading? You said you were at a book club with the Irish Embassy. Is that an online book club, or is it actually face-to-face? And how intense was your reading, and what kind of podcast did you discover during this time?
Oh gosh, well, the book club initially had been face-to-face, and then it moved online during the pandemic, and we've gone back now to face-to-face meetings, which is great. It focuses on Irish authors, so if anybody out there wants to catch up on their Irish author reading list, you're more than welcome to join in. Just the details are on the Irish Embassy website. So I've always been a pretty voracious reader, and my go-to is crime fiction. I love it. And thankfully in Ireland there are lots of great crime fiction writers, and a lot of them are women. So like if you're looking for some tips, Tana French from she did the Dublin series. Liz Nugent, if you want some psychological thrillers, they're pretty terrifying. Jane Casey is great as well. She's got a range of books, the Maeve Kerrigan books. Jo Spain is also a really good Irish female crime writer. And if that's not your cup of tea, because I know it's not everybody's cup of tea at all. Like Marian Keyes is just always a wonderful author, and she published the follow-up to her. She had a very successful book about 20 years ago called Rachel's Holiday, and she published the follow-up to that a couple of months ago, called Again Rachel. So that was really just fun reading, just beautiful. It was like catching up with an old friend.
So you like the thrill of thrillers during your pandemic reads. So that's quite interesting. Now, were you also listening to true crime podcasts, which is obviously a hugely popular genre now, and Netflix and everybody else seems to be doing hundreds of series on every crime under the sun. So what is your favorite go-to podcast in that space, or others?
Yes, I listen to true crime podcasts as well. I promise you, I'm not that dark. But I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. So of course, like my favorite murder is probably the best known, one of the most popular ones. I actually went to see that being recorded in Amsterdam in 2018, which was great to watch a podcast being recorded. Again, some Irish ones like The Creep Dive is quite interesting if you like creepy stuff. It's quite fun, but it's not all doom and gloom. So I do listen to some non-crime fiction or non-crime podcasts. So some of my favorites would be there's our own one from Euro, Water Matters. So everything you've ever wanted to know about the water sector, you can get lots of answers there. I also listen to, I don't know if the book, the teenage book series, Sweet Valley High. I don't know if that was as big here in Europe as it was in Ireland and England.
Sure.
So it's these twins who go to high school in America, and they're perfect, perfect size 6 figures, perfect blonde hair, green blue eyes, the color of the Pacific Ocean. And there's a podcast called Double Love, which just goes through all the books, and that's quite funny because it's quite true to life. So other podcasts that I listen to would be the QI Elves, No Such Thing as a Fish. I listen to that every week. There's another one called You're Wrong About, which explores myths and kind of debunks things that you think are you think you know the true story behind something, but you're wrong about. Kind of gives you the real story behind it. So these would be, excuse me, these would be on my my weekly listening rota, as well as the usual current affairs, news podcasts that I listen to every day as well.
Right. So we'll share some of those in the comments below. So please keep them coming so that we can share that with the listeners. And also, if other people have some suggestions of their favorite podcasts or true crime or kind of thriller, please share it right here. Now, you recently tweeted about things in relation to what women should or shouldn't say. Maybe, Leora, you had a question on that.
Yeah, maybe I can clarify. At the beginning of the year, there was someone with the account name of Laura Assessi, but that's not her start word. And she tweeted, ladies, one thing we're not doing in 2022 is ending sentences with, if that makes sense, and if that's okay. Tell the others. And you retweeted that. And I thought it was interesting. And I also realized that that's indeed something women do much more often than men. Instead of saying thanks for your patience, we say sorry for the delay. We say it'd be easy. We say so sorry, I totally missed that, instead of yeah, thanks for letting me know if you made a small mistake. Is this something that you're very interested in, or did you just retweet it? Do you have more examples of how we should rephrase things and come across as stronger and less insecure potentially?
Absolutely. Yes, it's something that I do feel quite strongly about. I think women are more likely to have imposter syndrome and to downplay their achievements. So I think anything that we can do as people, male or female or whatever, to promote our colleagues and to advance each other, I think that's I think that should be encouraged. And if you're it's important to support other people and raise them up, raise their visibility. So one of the things that I'm very aware of is when I'm writing an email is that I say please quite a lot in my email. So before I send it out, I'll always go back, and I think my record was 7 pleases in an email that was quite short. And so just going through that and saying, please find attached the documents, and please let me know your comments, and please let me do this. And just even filtering some of those pleases out can make a huge difference to what we're saying. And it's important to be, you can be just as polite but a lot more direct in what we're saying. And I think as well, as I'm a native English speaker, so the one thing that we can get bogged down in as native English speakers could be that kind of politeness, whereas I think people who have learned English would be a lot more direct. So that's something that we can learn from other people. So be direct and say what you want to say, and don't apologize for it.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of comments. So we have, Justin, Neil, and Daniel saying hello. So hi. And Daniel saying those small details on emails are always important in order to make written communication feel warm and human. I mean, my experience has been that between French, because it's kind of my native language, and English, you express yourself differently. You use please and thank you actually a lot more in English, and because it's just a question of how you express it. So I think there's a cultural element, but I'm just wondering whether whether it shouldn't be that it's not just that maybe women have to be more assertive, but it's also maybe you want language in general, men as well, to be more polite. I mean, it's not necessarily I don't actually what I noticed when I was in the UK is that, I mean, saying please and thank you actually kind of helps smoothen things out, even if you don't necessarily feel super appreciative. It just makes life a little bit more friendly, and not saying it kind of makes things much rougher. So I think it's a cultural element. So what do you think? It should be a balance, moving more to that politeness in general, or do you think it's something that women need to really be more confident and use those assertive
Well,
things?
I remember having a conversation when I moved here to Belgium first, like 17 or 18 years ago, and somebody pointed out to me that I or Irish people, we say I'm sorry all the time, and we say please and thank you quite a lot, an awful lot more than in other cultures. And I think in some Scandinavian languages, there's no way of saying please. It kind of depends on how you the form of the verb that you use. Kind of the politeness is included in that. So I thought that was quite unusual, quite peculiar. That maybe it's an idiosyncrasy of the language that we do this. Look, you have to, like, I believe in, you should be polite. Don't be rude. But yeah, and I think women are more likely to say please and thank you, and to kind of express themselves in that sort of way more than men do. And it's something that can be taken advantage of by some people.
But one thing is being polite, and there's in principle nothing against it, and it's good to say please and thank you. And when you don't do that, that's probably not going to help you very much. At the same time, we see a lot that women, after every sentence, or they add these little words, they make themselves sort of smaller in language, and that's across the board, from people in Ireland who probably do that even more than their already very polite counterparts, or polite in language, because you have to see it in the context of the own language, to people in what would be considered to a non-Dutch person as a more direct language that Dutch is. It's always saying things like, I hope that was okay. Oh, I'm sorry that I'm late. Like constantly apologizing, whereas a man would come into a meeting room and say, might not even say it, too late, might not even say anything. Or if they would say something, would just say one word and probably wouldn't feel as embarrassed, So it's a whole thing. But if you can, it all starts with communication, because if you can start communicating differently, you start feeling differently, you start feeling more self-assured, you might be treated in a different way as well. And so it helps. And so if you're a person who says please 50 times in one short email message, that's probably something you need to change. Whereas that Phil doesn't say please because he probably needs to add a few pleases. So of course also a personal. it's a personal.
Say please.
I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying if. Yeah.
But actually, we have a message from Nicolas Olivier, who's actually a French speaker, saying, I say please and thank you in almost all my emails. I don't feel pressure to do it at all. And actually, so for me, I think that, as I said, it's much more a habit in the UK, at least, when I compared it to it in a French-speaking, even English-speaking, international English versus French. I actually also think that you can be pretty aggressive and confident and still be polite. I mean, you can say, thank you so much for your kind response. And then, when I think there's a very passive aggressive kind of polite British tone, which is like you're saying please and thank you, but you really don't sound like you mean it if you read in between the lines. And actually, I think, Leora, this is a discussion we often have, because you say that the Dutch are very direct, and something that they say might actually just be there to try and get straight to the point, rather than it being something that was being rough. What do you think between the Dutch and the British way of communicating?
I mean, if you just put on your glasses and say, okay, this is how if an English person would say something the way a Dutch person says it, it would be rude. But you cannot say that Dutch person therefore is rude. because they're just translating something they say in Dutch to English, and it sounds rude. Like you say, there is a way you say the verb that doesn't exist in English, and so that then doesn't translate. So that's one thing. Another thing is, for example, in Dutch culture, when you go to someone's office to ask for a favor, you first ask for the favor and then you do the small talk, so that there is no like, oh, you just came to do small talk just to get a favor. People feel cheated, so they first get the business out of the way and then they go to, hey, and how are you, and how's the dog, and how's your mom. So of course in English culture, or let's say British culture, you first start with the small talk and be very rude to me and say, hey, could you blah blah. So, but there's no right or wrong. You can't say that one is better than the other. It's just what you're used to, and and what is polite in your culture. I always get a little annoyed with the Dutch. So I also find it very refreshing when you go into a store, and it has nothing to do with the debate about how women should talk or should not talk. But when you go into a store in the Netherlands and you say, and you ask them, and this has happened multiple times with my non-Dutch husband. He would go into a store and say, is this the best music system that there is? He'd say, no, it's not, but we don't sell the best one. This is the best we have. I mean, I find that so refreshing, so honest. So Dutch people will tell you everything as it is. They're honest. If there's something really nice, they will say, this is amazing. If there's something not nice, they will tell you as well. Is that rude or is it just honest? I like that honesty. It's what I grew up with. Yeah, I find it refreshing.
I find the honesty refreshing too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's there's it's a strong cultural element, which means that we all come from that. I think what's very interesting about Brussels is that we're actually always confronting people from different backgrounds and cultures, but we have by and large English is the dominant language, which means it's not an English that actually belongs to any particular country, and it's a kind of compromise English or international English where you kind of have to try to reprocess the rules. And that's why I think, for me, some politeness is actually can sometimes be almost tactical, which is okay. You can say please and thank you a lot, but it's really, it's not the same please that you would say in a purely British or Irish context. And I think it acquires that different meaning. How has your kind of, discovery of international culture being in Brussels? So how do you have you actually spent a lot of time with your fellow Irish folks, or how are you just visiting every nationality like you normally do in Brussels?
Yeah, so as I said, I think I've been living here about 17, 18 years at this stage, and yeah, I'm not a very good Irish expat, I have to say. I think I go to an Irish bar maybe once a year, twice a year, and that's usually when the Six Nations are on. And aside from being a member of the Embassy Book Club, that's pretty much my entire Irish agenda here, to tell you the truth. So yeah, most of my friends are English or Belgian, French, Austrian, Polish, Swedish. Pretty much from everywhere. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not supporting not as supportive of the Irish pubs as some other people are. So I think it's important when you go to another country, when you live in another country, to experience the culture. That's what we're all here for. And that's getting to know other people, getting to know another culture, listening to the local news and getting involved in your local community a little bit. I think it's that's why we're all living abroad. I think it would be a very sad experience if we all kind of just recreated our home countries where we're living. So yeah, I think just get out there, get to know people of other cultures and other viewpoints to you. This is also why we go on holidays, is to experience other cultures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, I think Brussels is quite unique in that way, because a lot of the time you spend time with lots of people from lots of different places. So, and unlike some places where there's a strong community of foreigners who live together, in Brussels you can't. I think that's quite rare. You tend to mix with lots of different nationalities, and actually a lot of people spend time not with Belgians, because actually they kind of like to connect with if you're from the international community, because the international community is almost a big part of the home community, given, I think we look at the numbers where Brussels has the largest amount of international non-Belgium born residents anywhere in the world after Dubai. And I think that says a lot, given Dubai has about 3% of natives from, who are from there. Leora?
Yeah, I wanted to advocate for teaching social linguistics at primary schools, because we tend to judge individuals based on the way they speak, whereas, and I think that's more important here and in Dubai than anywhere else, because people have different speaking cultures, even though they might be speaking the same language. And so if someone's very quiet, we think, oh, they're polite. If someone's very outspoken and interrupts others, we say, oh, they're rude, or so we judge people based on the way they speak. And often the way they speak is nothing more than a reflection of the culture they come from. But we don't know this. Nobody gets taught this. I studied social linguistics, one of my studies, so I'm passionate about it. But I feel that if we were to teach this in primary schools, there would be much fewer fights and confrontations, especially in those multilingual environments. But we have immigrant communities everywhere in the world where people get judged upon their behavior, by the way they speak, which is completely right.
I agree. Like some people, like you say, some people will interpret quietness as rudeness, and it's all about interpretation, and it's all about learning from each other.
Absolutely. And I mean, another thing is obviously that humor is always a little bit challenging when people are using it. Every country has a different idea of what's funny. And I think that's something that people have to navigate in quite, I would say, amusing ways in Brussels. But, probably there's probably a great book on this or podcast. So please share your suggestions or your experiences of podcasts and books on the topic of being in a country with lots of different languages. That's all we have time for today, but it was great to have your insight. Thank you very much for this. And thank you for joining us on our first ZN Live. Well, our first renamed ZN Live. Have a fantastic weekend, hopefully with good weather. I'm just checking. It's kind of holding up right now. And we will see you online, and we will see you next Friday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.